This is a red velvet brownie ice cream cheesecake made with homemade red velvet Oreos and a decadent milk chocolate fudge sauce. In this video, I'm going to break down how to make each of these elements, including the red velvet cookies and brownies, as well as the homemade ice cream cheesecake. This recipe is absolutely delicious, so let's get into it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is make your red velvet cookies for the cookie crumb base. For this, you're just going to do like a typical cookie and beat your butter and your sugars together. Now this might take a few minutes and it is going to be a little bit shaggier than a typical cookie recipe. Now while that's beating, you can combine your dry ingredients, which includes your flour, your cocoa, baking powder, baking soda, and just mix that to combine. Try to get the clumps out as much as you can. You can also sift the cocoa if that's of concern to you, but it's really not that big of a deal. So you're going to set that aside and go back to your sugar and butter. Scrape your bowl and make sure that the mixture is all combined. Add your egg and you can add your food coloring. Here I used a specific red velvet flavored coloring. You can use this or you can add vinegar if you're just using red coloring. And you're going to mix this to combine until you get a nice consistent texture. Now you might have to do this by hand. I did myself because sometimes the machine doesn't get the bottom of the bowl. And once that's nice and combined, you're going to add all of your dry ingredients. And you can mix to combine until you get something that's like a thicker, pastier texture, which you'll see in a minute. Obviously, you can do this step by hand, but it's just easier with a standing mixer. But feel free to do it however your personal preference. And this is kind of what the texture of the dough is going to look like. It's almost Play-Doh-y, but really more of a pasty texture, and it kind of holds together. So from there, you're going to just grease a cookie sheet and grab about a tablespoon of your cookie dough. And you really want to flatten these out to about a quarter or to half an inch thick. You might need to put a bit of water on your fingers just to flatten them out so they don't stick. And then you're going to bake these. Pop these in the oven at 350 and bake them for between 11 to 12 minutes depending on your oven. And you're going to let these cool. Now, while your red velvet cookies are cooling, you can start to make your red velvet brownie. Here I'm using an 8x8 cake pan and just lining it with parchment paper and greasing it lightly and setting that aside. Then you're going to grab a large bowl, inserting your butter and your sugar and your cocoa, and you're going to cream these together for a few minutes. Now, this part isn't super essential or necessary if you don't have a machine to cream your butter, cocoa, and sugar together. But when you do this, it does help to give a bit of a fluffier, lighter brownie. So once that's done and you get your mixture combined, you're going to add your coffee and your vinegar. The coffee and the vinegar are really going to give that red velvet taste to the brownie. And you also want to add your food coloring. Then you're going to mix this to combine and you're going to get a texture that looks a little bit something like this. And you're going to add your eggs and mix to combine. Here again, you might need to mix it manually by hand because sometimes the mixture can't get to the bottom. So you really want to make sure that all of the eggs is combined into the mixture. And once it is, you're just going to get something that looks a little bit something like this texture, and you can add in your flour. From there, just mix to combine. This part I just did manually by hand because I didn't want to overmix the mixture too much. Now, once it's fully combined, you'll get something that's a little bit of a texture like this. It's a little bit thicker, but a classic brownie texture. You're gonna grab your pan and pour your brownie, red velvet brownie mixture into your greased pan. Now, because it is a little bit thicker in texture, you will have to kind of spread it out evenly, just making sure that it's evenly spread. And you're gonna bake this at 350. Now, I covered mine with aluminum foil for 30 minutes and then baked without the aluminum foil for 7 minutes, so a total of 37 minutes. But this will be dependent on your oven. And once that's done baking, just grab it out of the oven and let it cool. Now, once your cookies have fully cooled to room temperature, just put them in a blender and you're gonna finally grind them till you get that classic cheesecake crumb for your cookie base, and just put these in a container and set them aside. Now, this part is optional if you don't want to use store-bought condensed milk for your ice cream cheesecake. You can use the store-bought and it works just as well, but I like to make my own condensed milk when I'm making these ice cream cheesecakes. It really adds a nice flavor to the cake, but it is an extra step, so it is totally optional. But here, I just added in a medium pot 2 cups of whole milk with 1 cup of sugar. Put this on low heat for a few minutes to let the sugar dissolve, and then you're gonna ramp it up to medium heat and bring the milk to a boil. Let this boil for a little bit, and then you're gonna add some cornstarch to it, really making sure to mix it so that it doesn't stick to the bottom of your pot. And you wanna stir this pretty consistently, but you do wanna let it boil a little bit to activate the cornstarch. The cornstarch is going to help with the texture of the cake. It absorbs the moisture from the milk, so does the sugar. It's going to help reduce the risk of freezer burn to your cake and just reduce the overall amount of water that there is in your ice cream, which is ideal because who wants watery ice cream? That's what leads to freezer burn a lot of the time. So you're just going to keep this on medium heat, whisking it consistently until it thickens. Once it's thickened, you're going to strain it. You're going to set this aside and allow it to cool completely and pop it in the fridge. Now, of course, this does add time to making this cake, but look at how delicious this looks. It's absolutely worth it. And if you are using store-bought condensed milk, put it in the fridge for a few hours just to let it get to a cooler temperature for your cheesecake. Now, once everything is cooled, your red velvet brownies are ready, your cookies are ready, your condensed milk is ready, you're gonna prep your cake pan. So here I'm using a 7-inch springform cake pan, lining the bottom of it with parchment paper and lining the sides with cake color. The cake color is optional, though highly recommend it because it does give a very nice finish to your cake and it makes it a lot easier to take it out when it's done. But it's also doable without if you don't have any. Once your cake pan is ready, we're going to make the cake crust. So weighing out 200 grams of your red velvet crumbs, and you're gonna pour your melted butter and combine these together until it's fully combined, and then you're going to pour this into the bottom of your cake pan. Now you do want to try to get as level of a cake base as possible just for the milk chocolate fudge sauce that's going to be poured on top after. It will be easier if you have a flat bottom. So just pressing down pretty firmly to make sure that you have a nice solid cake base. And there is what it will look like when it's done. From here, you're just gonna pop this in the freezer for like 10 minutes just to let it set and come together. While that's setting, you can make your milk chocolate fudge sauce. So you're going to grab your 100 grams of milk chocolate, adding in your corn syrup and your vanilla. And then in a separate microwave safe bowl, you want to warm up your heavy cream. And once you've done that, pour it into your milk chocolate. And let this sit for about a minute just to really incorporate together. Once that's done, you can start mixing to combine. Now, chances are you will have to pop this in the microwave for another 5 seconds just to really make sure that all of the chocolate is melted. As you can see here, there is chunks of chocolate that are not melted, and you really want to make sure you have a nice consistency to your fudge sauce. So I did pop this in the microwave for like 5 seconds and mixed it to combine, and it was then the perfect texture. So this is what you're looking for, and this is ready to be poured onto the cake crust. So from here you can grab your cake pan and cake crust that was setting in the freezer, and you're gonna pour about a half a cup of this milk chocolate fudge sauce on top of the cake crust. I like to leave some set aside to drizzle on top of the cake, though this is totally optional. If you want to use all of the fudge sauce right now for this part, you can totally do that. And you do want to keep your fudge sauce not hitting the sides of your cake pan because it will get messy when you're trying to get it off. So just trying to keep it in the center but spread out as much as you possibly can, just not hitting the edges of the cake pan. You can also grab it physically like this and just kind of move it around, and you will find that the fudge sauce will slowly move to where you want it to go. So just spreading it out evenly. And once that's done, you can place your saran wrap on top and pop this in the freezer for 15 minutes to 30 minutes at least, just to let that chocolate fudge sauce be nice and set. And while that's cooling and setting in the freezer, you can make your cheesecake batter. So you want to grab your softened cream cheese and you're just going to beat it just to make sure there's no lumps or anything in it, making it a smooth, creamy texture. And then you can add your yogurt and your vanilla, and you can combine these together, again, making sure you have a nice creamy texture with no lumps in it. Once that's nice and combined, you can grab your condensed milk from the fridge, add it to your mixture, and again, you're going to mix this to combine. And once that's nice and combined, the last element that you'll add in is your corn syrup. And again, you're just going to add this in and really just ensure that it's a nice, consistent texture, creamy, and just all around well mixed together. And once your cheesecake mixture here is nice and combined, just pop this in the fridge while you make the whipped cream. But of course, before that, you can grab your cooled red velvet brownie and chop it into small pieces. For this cake, size of cake, I did only use half of the brownie, so you can do whatever you want with the rest of it. But just chopping it into small squares. You can obviously use a bigger knife than I did. It would just make it easier and faster. But just making these small squares because you don't want it to be too big of bites in your ice cream cheesecake. And grabbing about a heaping half a cup, and you're gonna set these aside. Those will go on top of the cheesecake, and then using the rest inside of the cheesecake. Now you want to grab your whipped cream into a large bowl, and you're gonna whip it until you get stiff peaks, until it gets to something like this. And this is what's going to help make our ice cream. Now grabbing your cheesecake mixture out of the fridge, you're gonna slowly add in increments the whipped cream, folding it into your cheesecake batter. Now you don't want to add all of your whipped cream at once. You really want to do this one heaping spoonful at a time, and just gently folding this in so that you're not destroying all of the air bubbles. That the whipped cream will help make the ice cream lighter. So just gently folding it in. And you'll see as you start to add more and more whipped cream, the texture of the cheesecake mixture will get a little bit lighter and a little bit fluffier from the whipped cream itself. Now, once you have your nice creamy ice cream cheesecake, you're going to separate this batter into 2 bowls. So doing about roughly 2 cups of your batter in each separate bowl. And in one of your bowls, you're going to add your brownies, your red velvet brownies, and you can add some of your red velvet cookie crumbs as well. And you're just going to gently mix and stir this to combine. This is going to make for your red velvet brownie layer of the cake. Now, once that's ready and you have both of your layered cheesecakes, you can grab your cake pan out of the freezer, and you're going to start with your regular cheesecake, your plain ice cream cheesecake, sorry. And you can pour about 1 cup of that batter into your cake pan and just spreading out a layer evenly throughout the bottom of your cake pan. And you can tap it a little bit like this just to let the air bubbles rise to the surface and get those out. And you get a nice smooth surface. Then you can grab 1 cup of your red velvet brownie cheesecake mix and pour this on top of your plain cheesecake, and just spreading it out to make a nice even layer. And once that's done, spreading the remaining of your plain mixture on top of the red velvet brownie and just making a nice even layer. And you can tap the cake pan onto the counter just to allow the bubbles out. And lastly, you'll pour the remaining of your red velvet brownie cheesecake mixture on top, just evenly spreading it out. So spreading it out until you get this nice even layer. And then you can start adding the remaining of your cookie crumbs on top of the cake. Just spreading them out. You don't have to use all of them, but just spreading them out as you see fit. And then grabbing that half a cup of brownies that you had set aside and placing these on top of the cake. Now you might have to push down on these brownies a little bit just to incorporate them so that they don't fall out of the cake, because it is a little bit thick, so you just want to push down gently on them. And once that's done, just grabbing your saran wrap and placing this in the freezer overnight, making sure it has enough time to set in the freezer. Now, once you're ready to serve this or you want to finalize it, you can take this out of the freezer. I mean, just look at how beautiful this looks. You can take the saran wrap off, grab the surrounding spring form. You can pop that off, but leave the cake collar on. And then you're going to remove the bottom with the parchment paper. Grab your cake board or whatever it is that you're placing this cake on, place it on top, and then you can take your cake collar off, and this will give it a nice, clean, elegant look. And this is what it looked like coming right out of the freezer. So beautiful. And from here you can warm up the remaining of your chocolate fudge sauce and just gently drizzling it on the cake. Gives it that really, really nice finish and makes it look so good. And this is the final product. So when you're ready to eat it, just pop this out of the freezer for like 10 minutes. And then you can cut into it. This is what it looks like from the inside. And there you have the red velvet brownie ice cream cheesecake. This is absolutely delicious and amazing for any type of occasion. If you like this recipe or any other recipes I've shared here, please follow, like, and subscribe.